Hello, everybody. Hi. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome, everyone, to our latest update for Pulse Pounding Challenge 2024. So exciting to have you here. This is more or less the final round, the last update before next week, which is going to be our grand finale where we reveal who is the winner. And so you could say, "Well, wait a minute, I haven't even submitted yet." Today, we are going to be opening up submissions. So feel free to go on in and fill out your submissions. Before you do that, though, I'm going to go over the rules yet again just to make sure that your entry is in tip top shape and so on. All right. So, what are the rules of this game? Remember, these are rules, not guidelines. So, no more than 2,000 words. No more than 2,000 words. We have a little word counter in the upper right hand corner of the writer's desk. Yes, it needs to say no more than 2,000 words. 2,000 is fine. 2001, it may be a space odyssey, but it is not going to be eligible for this challenge. Uh, there is no minimum, but keep in mind, I would imagine most of you are probably going to write more than like 10 words. But yeah, no, there is no minimum. Somebody has, looks like Abe has 638 words. Yep, that'll be fine. No problem there as well. We do want you to write a narrative. So this is not going to be self-help or something like that, please. I mean, if you want to tell me the best way to grow tomatoes in my lawn, they'll be fun to read, but that's not going to be eligible for this challenge. We are going to be reading these at the next week at the live session next week. So it is important that they fit the narrative mold. Yep. Experimental writing forms are acceptable. So if you want to do something a little bit unusual, like write a diary or a blog or something like that, feel free to do so. No illustrations, so please do not put pictures in your file. If you have like dinkuses or something, that's okay. But no illustrations because no illustrations. This is not an illustrated uh story contest. This is just for the text in your file. Okay. The creative guidelines, pretty easy going. The first sentence really needs to include action. So, but keep in mind, I'm being pretty vague on this, or not vague, I'm being pretty broad on this. If it's the wind is rustling through the trees, that's action. I just mean something is happening. Don't be like, um, the wall was blue. I mean, that's not action. That's just a description. So it's not too hard, but yes, action. Now, you of course can start it, off to the races with some sort of breathtakingly exciting action, but that's up to you because, of course, you'll have to figure out a way to make it interesting from then on. So you could start, there I was standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, wondering how I would survive, but you don't actually have to do that. And in fact, the genre doesn't have to be suspense or thriller. It's just that style of writing. This is a pulse pounding scene or moment or short story. This is not necessarily a thriller work. Characters in conflict with the setting is not a bad idea for this. This is not an absolute requirement. This is more of a suggestion for how to do that first sentence being action. If you have a character in conflict with the setting, it tends to help you out. You do need to have a ticking clock or an option lock. So a ticking clock means there is a time limit in which this character has to get it done. Time can be almost anything. It can be like by the end of the day. It can be, a specific time. It can be until they run out of air, which is not as specific of a time or things like that. Like where they don't know how long it is, but they definitely know that the end is near, right? Option lock is where they're trying to solve a problem and the options get whittled down. So they might say, try this method and then that method and then that method. And it starts to whittle down into where it feels like there's no other no other options available or only one option available they don't want to do or something like that. So it needs one or the other, either an inevitable time limit or options are limited. Or if you do both, well, you have a highly stressful story. This exercise has been quite useful. The recent novella, you average 12.3 words per sentence, which is typical. On this story, you average 7.6. Yeah. So one thing you can learn from that, Vance, is you can learn perhaps that may not be the way you would want to write an entire work, right? That's a little bit breathless. On the other hand, you might have learned how to do a bit stronger. Uh, you just it benefit long term. Even if you moved the 12.3 words closer to the 10, that might be better for you long term. There are novelists that write under 9 words per sentence for an entire book. I mean, they would be the ones like a Lee Child or something like that that writes in a thriller pace, but they definitely exist. So it can be done. So keep that in mind. Can the ticking clock be ongoing without the end happening in the story? Well, yeah, they don't like a ticking clock means that unless they solve the problem, the end is near. That doesn't mean the end has to show up, right? Imagine you have a ticking bomb. They can defuse it before it reaches zero, right? Uh, Yeah, I guess you could say, well, that ends it. Okay, that's perhaps correct, but I guess my thing is if you don't want to resolve it, if that's the question, do you have to resolve the problem? And the answer is no. You do not actually have to resolve the problem. That's not a requirement of this challenge. Now, do I think that the audience, because remember the audience is going to vote at the end, is the audience generally keen on open endings? No, generally not. People don't generally like cliffhangery endings, so I would be cautious about that. But I suppose I could see ways that you could incorporate it where it wouldn't be a problem. Option lock. Yes, the option lock is the idea is that you are locked. The options are locking you in, right? The walls are closing in. So, uh, imagine imagine there's a lock, like you're in a room and it's filling up with water and there's a locked door. And so first you grab the fire extinguisher and you try to break the door down. That doesn't work. And then you try I don't know, some other implement, you break it down. You try your phone and nobody's answering. Like those are all different options, right? To try to get out of the problem. You try to smash the window, it doesn't work. And it gets to the point where it feels like there's either no way out or there's maybe only one way out that the character doesn't want to do or something like that. The idea is that you have a ratcheting up of tension because they keep trying different options and they don't work. And so it's locking them into fewer and fewer choices. That's what option lock is. All right. And on this and obviously for the highest amount of suspense, what you do is you literally lock them into like one option that they don't want to do, or there are no options that seem to be available and it just seems hopeless. When will there be a contest that you guys judge? You hate feeling it's a it's a popularity contest. Well, we just did that. The last short story challenge is not voted on by the YouTube audience, if that's what you mean. In terms of it being a popularity contest, I suppose, but a lot of times I don't think people know who wrote the stories because I think a lot of times people don't even reveal that. And so, unless you actually figured it out somehow, we don't announce the authors of the stories as we're reading them. They have to announce themselves. I'm not going to I can't stop somebody from saying they wrote it, but I would imagine that for the most part people are just whatever they reacted to on the live stream, to be honest. Like I would certainly hope so. Um is we must catch the killer before he kills again. A ticking clock? Yes. Yes it is. Just because you don't know when it's going to be, you're saying you've got to do this before X happens. Yes, that's a version of a ticking clock, right? Does the story have to be thriller? No. Can it be anything that fulfills all the guidelines? Yes. If the children's story, the suspense is cartoony, perfect. No worries. So yeah, no, you're good, Joseph. That is fine. Is the story title and the author's name part of the total word count? Uh, no, but you also don't need to put it in there because the story title should be the name of your file in the writer's desk. So you don't actually have to have it typed in the words, and you don't need your name at all. It's not relevant because we know where the file comes from when you submit it, but we strip it off for the judging we and for when we display it on the screen, we're not going to display that anyway. So don't there's no reason to put it in the body of your text, as it were. It's just going to get cut out. So don't do that. Is there a challenge every month? Yes. So this is the wrap up of this specific challenge. The submissions are due on Sunday. But yeah, we have people coming in all the time for these challenges because we just do them all the time. And so, excuse me, there'll be a little bit of a gap though before the next one because we will next week Tuesday we are going to have the finalists and the voting for this pulse pounding challenge, and then the week after that we're going to announce the winners from the main challenge. The main challenge is a little bit of a bigger challenge because those can be up to 5,000 words long, so it takes a little bit longer for us to go through them. And then July 10th or July 9th is going to be the kickoff of the next challenge. So it's coming pretty soon here. All right. This was a tough challenge. Well, it is supposed to be a challenge. And the goal is that no matter what you've learned something, you've grown as an artist. That's what we're trying to do with these challenges. Right? It's going to be really good. But I can't tell you it's in 2 weeks. That's a ticking clock for you, right? Sentences need to be under 9 average words. Now, some of you are confused about this. Like, how would you know? Keep in mind, inside the writer's desk, inside AutoCrit, if you go to pacing and you go to sentence variation, you need that, give you that number, and you want it to be under 10. All right. Is my internet getting a little bit wonky? Sorry about that. Any genre is acceptable. Somebody else asked about that. And keep in mind, we are reading this on YouTube. So content, be a little bit cautious with. I would say nothing beyond R. If you want to go more like PG-13 just to be on the safe side, fair enough. YouTube's pretty lenient, but just be cautious with some of the content. If it's very edgy, if it's politically charged or things like that, that can end up getting you kind of flagged on YouTube, and we're not trying to do that. And we're not like a kids show, but we do try to keep ourselves from being on YouTube's naughty list as much as possible, for sure. Submit by June 23rd. Seems like I was glitching a little bit. Hopefully, I'm all right now. I was doing okay just a bit ago, so I think I'm okay. I'm not seeing any problems on my end, so hopefully everything is all right. If you missed anything, just let me know. I'm happy to repeat. Uh, F bomb. I believe is fine. I don't think that's an issue. So I think that I mean you can get flagged for that kind of stuff. I'm just trying to avoid things like certain types of criminal behavior, particularly like sexual violence and things like that. I was glitching in 9-word sentences or below. Yes. So no more than 9 words in your sentences. You can go to the pacing report, go to sentence variation, and then that will give you the average. Average. Oh, you're joking. Okay, I see what you're saying. It's a joke. See, I'm taking you all so seriously. Where do you go on the website to submit for the contest? Aha. That's great. Yes, let's talk about that before I talk about characters. 9 or 8.9. I guess I said under 9, so 8.9 is the minimum, I suppose. Yeah. So, um, I don't think I said 9 or less, right? I said under 9. Yes, under 9. So 8.9 is the highest you can be. Yeah. Okay. Submit by June 23rd. All right. So when it comes to submissions, you are going to go into the writer's desk. I'm going to bring it up here. I'm going to be zoomed in to show you. This is the upper right hand corner of the writer's desk. So you are going to come up. Whoops, sorry. We have a little talking head here. Whoop, you're going to come up here and you're going to hit the save button. Do. And then you're going to go to where it says submissions. See, it's the little one here. And then you're going to see where it says short story challenge, June 2024. Look at that. Ends 5 days, 1 hour, 42 minutes, and some odd seconds. Now there's a ticking clock for you. So once you've hit this button, that's it. So do not hit it until you're absolutely super duper ooper ready. Okay? That's the technical term. So yes, do not do it until you are completely sure that that is your entry. If you make a mistake, it's very difficult for us to fix it. And to be honest, it's tricky for us to allow for such a thing because with the rules of fairness and all of that. So please don't do it until you're 100% ready. That being said, please don't do it at the literal 11th hour on Sunday. It will close Sunday at night, at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. Don't do it in the 11th hour because who knows? You could have a technical problem. Your internet could go out. You could, you know, your battery could die, something like that. So don't wait till the 11th hour, but also don't do it until you're absolutely ready. Yep, super duper ooper. Yep, that is the official title of that. Average. So longer sentences would be okay if they're very short ones. Correct. So you could essentially have a 30-word sentence and a one-word sentence, and the average would be 15. And then you could add like one more sentence that's one word, and then your average would come down, right? So yes, you can do that. If you want to have crazy variances and dynamics, that's actually an effective way of writing. I don't recommend 30-word sentences. That sounds a little bit dense. But yeah, dynamics can be a wonderful thing and can make scenes much more compelling. So please, dynamics, don't make every sentence 8.9 words long. Average needs to be that. So I suppose you could just have a whole paragraph of one-word sentences in order to make up that average, but I don't recommend it. I'm apparently glitching again. It's really weird. On my end, I don't see this at all. So I don't know if this is a YouTube thing or what, but my internet looks totally fine. And I'm not even seeing any glitches on my side. So I'm sorry. I don't really know how to make it better. Mostly it's okay. All right. Sounds good. I just sound like a guitar ever so often. All right. Could be worse. Could be worse. How the glitch stole Christmas. All right. So, Max Headroom. I am a recording. Okay. Character arcs. Yes, you came on here to talk about character arcs. Character arcs, of course, are very important. Now, in a short work like this, you often don't have a lot of room to do some massive, intense, lengthy character arc, right? You have to be cautious about the level of development your character is going to experience because space is at a premium. However, it's good to at least have the character begin and end in different spots because otherwise you can wonder, well, what was the point of reading the thing? It might have been a high concept, it might have been an interesting world, maybe an interesting mystery, but ultimately it didn't seem to matter to the character involved, right? So, how do we think about character arcs in general, and how can we apply that to a short work such as the one we're working on now? Now, keep in mind, character arcs cannot be explored until the story is known, not fully, right? Unless you actually know the beginning, middle, and end of your story. How do you know exactly what the character arc is? Now, you could say you could know what the character arc is and not know how they get there. And you could say maybe you don't know that aspect of the story, but you really can't explore a character arc until you've at least done a first draft or a proper outline. Now, of course, we're at the end of this challenge, so I'm sure all of you have built this out. So now it's a matter of strengthening whatever it is that you already have. And of course, there's the concept of a reverse outline if you're not an outliner, to look at that high level of what you experienced in that story. So, of course, you have some sort of setup or hook. I think of it a little bit more as a hook than a setup when it comes to a short story, because you just don't have a lot of time to like grab the audience. Of course, you should always be interested in hooking an audience, but in a short story, it's sort of like you're off to the races. You just don't have a lot of time to dilly dally with setup, like just basic setup. It's set up for the purpose of engaging us and getting us involved with something. So then we have the catalyst moment, also known as the call to adventure moment, right? So the character is given some sort of scenario that shakes things up, and they're off to the races. The conflict has been set. We have a sense of what it is they're trying to achieve. We have a sense that there's some sort of obstacle in their way, and they're trying to do that. Now, the important thing is in this sort of moment that we have a character that is active. At least that's my personal opinion. You can force them into this by just creating the circumstances where they have no choice but to engage. But even then, the manner of engagement gets to be a choice. So imagine you have somebody who is locking themselves in their house because there's a crazy monster outside. All right, well, that was the way they chose to engage with that conflict, right? They chose to hold themselves up in their house even if they didn't choose that the monster was there. You see what I mean? And I feel like leaning into the amount of agency, the amount of choices that your character has as much as possible is to your benefit versus making them feel completely stuck right at the get go. Now, later, it could be great to make them feel stuck. We're going to get to that a little bit later. But right off the top, it's tough because if you make it seem like they're no more than just somebody along for the ride, that the world's kind of steamrolling them, that's a hard character to really get behind, and it can make you feel kind of frustrated because I don't know. I just don't find that to be as effective of a storytelling device. So then you have a middle of your story, right? Because you've set up what the potential problem is, and then you have the risk of a boring middle because, well, you're just treading water waiting to get to the end. So the midpoint usually is some sort of twist, some sort of development where we find out some piece of information. The problem's a lot worse than we thought, some sort of presupposition was wrong, et cetera, et cetera. In the short story format, it is very easy to make the midpoint something bananas. And that's because we really haven't gotten that attached to anything just yet. Particularly if it's like a word, a thousand words, anything that we're going to feel like, angry that you deprived us of something or lying to us in the same way as if we are 35,000 words into something and there's a major twist, right? That's a lot more of a risky thing to do. And then, of course, we have disaster. Oh, can I repeat that? Okay, let me go back. So the midpoint, what I was saying is that in a short story, if we're only 1,000 words into a story and the author reveals something really major, like you thought this whole time yeah, I think I cut out for a bit there. So you thought this whole time that this was a story about a person being stalked by a killer, but it turns out 1,000 words in that they're actually the killer and it's the other person being stalked. That's the sort of thing that works out really well in a short story because you haven't really gotten that emotionally attached to the scenario that you'll be angry that the author was fooling you for 1,000 words. Whereas if it's 35,000 words, that can really backfire because now we've gotten incredibly emotionally invested in these characters in the scenario. We've thought about it a while. We've spent a fair amount of time, not just a few minutes, right? And so it's a little bit riskier. This is one reason why the Twilight Zone effectively was able to do some fantastic twists at the end of their episodes in ways that books generally can't, right? Because it was a shorter story form. So keep that in mind. You have more wiggle room to kind of go bananas with your midpoint in a short story that I feel you don't often in a novel. If you're writing a thriller, you kind of do because thrillers have that expectation in the audience that you can't believe anything. But if it's another genre, you got to be really cautious. Yeah, setting up a promise and not delivering is a bad idea. It is. In a But I do think in a short story, you can I'm not saying you're not delivering on the promise, but you can set up something and then you can twist it a lot easier because the promise only lasted 1,000 words. It's not the same thing. It's not that much of an investment at that point. That's my personal opinion. Okay. Disaster. This is where it's very helpful to make the character feel like they're locked into a scenario. So this is why I told you for this pulse pounding sort of scenario, option lock or time lock, right? This should be when those hit. Either the options seem to dwindle to almost nothing, the one option they really don't want to do, or there doesn't seem to be any options at all, or time is either ending or about to end or something like that, right? It just seems like we're back up is against the wall. That is a way to make a truly suspenseful, thrilling sort of moment. Again, you don't have to write in the thriller genre in order to participate in this challenge, but this could simply be a tense scene about somebody trying to get something accomplished, right? And at this moment, it's going to look rather disastrous that they are not going to be able to accomplish it. And the fact they even attempted to accomplish it is makes it all the worst. Why did they even try to do this in the first place? We really want to try to beat them up a fair amount of the time. Okay. And there'll be varying levels. So let's imagine kind of on the softer side. Let's imagine you're doing this as a romantic scene, right? And it's a big tense moment that this person is, I don't know, proposing to somebody, right? So at this point, you could feel like not only are they not going to be able to propose, but it was a terrible idea for them to even think that they should try to propose because now they're worried if the other person even likes them very much. That's kind of the big disaster for this moment. All right, and so then we end up with the resolution. Or do we? See, the thing with short stories is there isn't the same audience promise that there has to be a resolution because short stories traditionally have open endings at times. Now, do audiences generally prefer stories with endings? Of course they do. Like the Lady and the Tiger drives people bananas. But I'm just saying it is an option in a short story in a way that you really don't have in a lot of other works. Because again, you've only spent a little bit of a time with these characters, and sometimes not answering the question makes for a more provocative piece of art. Short story is a place to explore that, is to set up bad things and then just kind of leave it. Now, of course, if it's kind of the horror genre, often it doesn't resolve because that would get rid of the fear element of it, right? So, yeah, that's kind of a staple of that genre. But, if this is a romance short story, you could say, is the audience expectation the same that has to be happily ever after or happily for now? I would say in that situation, probably yes. But if you were ever going to experiment with, well, you're going to have to think about it and you'll have to insert your own ending about how they might work out or not. Short story is your best bet to experiment with something like that. So, but the thing about the resolution is the resolution should circle back to tell us where we should have started in the first place. Because how distant the resolution is from the setup forms the scope of the story. It's confident, and then they ended up less confident. Did you start them nervous and they ended up confident? Did you start them alive and they ended up dead? Did you start them off poor and they ended up super rich? It's up to you. Now, as you can imagine, the scope of a story for a 2,000 word piece, you want to be cautious about it because you want to give it the right amount of space that such a story would dictate. I'm not saying it's impossible to write a story about an impoverished person that becomes the richest person in the world in the over the course of 2,000 words. But you may want to ask yourself, is that really the appropriate medium to tell such a story, or should you narrow your scope and get into more depth about those specific parts of the process of their life, right? That specific character arc. Excuse me. So let's talk about some different character arcs and how you might incorporate them. So there's the redemption character arc. So the redemption character arc, the setup is somebody has something seriously wrong with them, some sort of mistake from the past, and then the resolution is they have overcome it, right? They've redeemed themselves. They are no longer a greedy person. They're no longer a person famous for this mistake. They have figured it out. So it makes sense, right? You often start off with somebody who maybe feels a little bit hopelessly lost because they did something and they don't know how to rectify the mistake. The catalyst is the opportunity to rectify the mistake. The midpoint is usually you find out the mistake was a lot worse than you thought, or it's a lot more difficult to solve, or it's hairier or fuzzier or whatever. It's a lot more uh, tricky, right? If the mistake is not even what you thought it was, they were lying to you, they were minimizing, and it turns out the mistake they did was worse, something like that, right? And then the disaster would be in their attempts to rectify all of this, they really have to face the danger, the hurt, the consequences of it. It looks like it was a bad idea to even try to rectify the problem. And then the resolution is, well, they have. Yay for them. Life moves on. But because you made it difficult along the way, it feels earned. It doesn't feel like just, I'm sorry. That's not really good enough, right? I mean, it can be in a sense. I'm not saying don't be forgiving, but I'm saying in the state for the sake of an artistic experience for a narrative, no, you want it to feel like a really an earned redemption arc. You don't want it to just be like they woke up one day and decided not to be a jerk anymore. Isn't that nice, right? You could say that's what happens to Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. However, uh, remember all the horrible things that he had to go through in order to get to that point, right? So to the world, it was just like he woke up one day, but to him, he went through a harrowing, traumatic experience. All right. So what about coming of age? You could also say this is like naive to informed kind of thing. Yeah, so the person starts out and they are not capable of something, they haven't reached some sort of level of maturity or understanding, and then that is highlighted. The catalyst moment allows them to engage in something that's going to challenge them, make them have to mature or engage in this material. The midpoint is that the weight of it becomes bigger than they expected. There are bigger consequences in the engagement of it. And then the disaster moment is, well, they thought that they were at this level of maturity, but they really aren't. They're not able to get it. The information is overwhelming them. Ignorance was bliss, all of those things. And then the resolution is okay. Now they've actually are at peace with this. They have moved forward and they have, actually matured. That would be the coming of age sort of story. Transformational story. This is just like it's similar to what I was just saying in that you could argue transformation is kind of like the abstraction of they start one way and they end up another way, right? But keep in mind how dramatic that transformation is, right? This would be like a rags to riches or whatever. And again, how big is that scope, and is this really a level of are you going to be able to get to the level of depth that that transformation would require? You also want to think about how easy you make something seem when you're dramatically transforming somebody from one way to another. So, what I generally recommend for something like a 2,000 word piece is you want to think of smaller transformations that you can really get into the depth. I tend to think those are more successful. So somebody who is, maybe a little bit less confident becoming more confident, somebody who is nervous becoming brave, things such as that. Somebody who is skeptical becoming more of a believer in something, things like that. All right. Sacrifice, the sacrificial plot line. Dun dun dun. So often, the kind of, you could say, the basic sort of tropey way of doing this would be if you're going to end in a sacrifice, you're generally going to start with somebody who's fairly selfish because then the sacrifice matters a lot more. Now, that's not the only way of doing it. You can start off with somebody who's just a very noble person, and it turns out the world is so awful. I went out. I went out. It sacrificed this whole screen. Anyway, I'm sorry that the connection's a little bit weak right now. It wasn't earlier when I was doing my other live stream. Anyway, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to start. Like Doctor Strange is kind of the standard sort of format, right? Where he'll eventually sacrifice himself for the world in like that time loop. So they start him off as a big egotistical jerk. You don't necessarily have to do that. You could start the person noble, maybe they're less significant to the world than they will be later or something like that. They end up with some sort of problem that they engage in. The midpoint is the problem is a lot worse. The disaster is it's so bad that they have to give up something about themselves, including and up to their very life. And then the resolution is either they have some sort of resurrection experience or cheating of death, or they literally do die, and it's about doing the right thing even though it's hard, and it's about their legacy on the other side or something like that. That's different though than a tragic plot line where somebody dies. Tragic plot lines are about people making bad decisions that gradually get worse and worse until finally their fatal flaw is their undoing. And so in some ways these are not very transformational arc. It's essentially what you often have is a character doubling down. Now, you can do a tragic arc where the character starts noble, then the catalyst moment is they could make an immoral decision. The midpoint is they have to double down on that immoral decision. The disaster is all those immoral choices eventually consume them, cause the disaster. And then the resolution is not they fix the disaster, it's the world, justice is served and they get steamrolled or something like that, right? That's a true tragic ending, is that not only do they not get what they need in life, uh they also don't accomplish what it is they were seeking out to accomplish. It's just a complete failure all around. And usually these are morality tales. There's a reason why the author's going through all this. They're exemplifying some sort of fatal flaw that humans tend to have, and they're dramatizing it for the audience. You do not have to add it once you submit. It's whatever the title was called. So if you didn't title your title before you submitted, it'll just be untitled, which is okay. Um, but if you titled it before, then that's what will be submitted. A discovery plot line is often like a meaning plot. It's somebody is interested in the answer to a question about the world or themselves. So they're starting out where they're either starting out non-inquisitive or inquisitive about something, but the catalyst moment is the ability to seek out the answer. So either they didn't care about it, and then the catalyst moment is you should be interested in this, and you could seek it out, or You've always been interested in it. Now let's find out the answer, right? The midpoint often is, well, do you actually want to know the answer of it? Is it worth all the effort to find out the answer of it? What about the implications to the answer of it? Things like that. And then the disaster is either they find out the answer and it's really awful, and then they have to figure out what to do with it, or the obstacle between them and the answer is too overwhelming for them to fix without them overcoming it, right? And then the resolution ultimately is what came about finding the answer and from the whole journey in the first place. Keep in mind, discovery stories can end where they don't actually learn the information. It's that's dangerous though, because that's like, it wasn't about that. It was the friends you made along the way. I'm not saying you can't end like that, but that is an ending that can happen. Um, and so what happens if you do that essentially is you've promised the audience a discovery story and you ended up in some sort of transformational story, and so you can lose them. That, I guess that's what I'm getting at. I'm kind of thinking as I'm saying that. But a true discovery story should end with a resolution of the answer, in my opinion. Mysteries are basically discovery stories. All right, so those are some different character arcs to think about and different ways of going about them. If you can't easily map on the story that you wrote for this contest onto one of those arcs, it doesn't necessarily mean anything all that terrible. But you should have a sense of that setup, that hook. Why am I initially interested in the character? What is motivating them, to change, do something in their life? What kind of obstacle is presenting itself? How does that obstacle get worse throughout the story so it doesn't just stagnate? How does it feel like, they're not going to be able to overcome the obstacle and then resolve it? That's, the most basic storytelling arc you can get to. But you should be able to easily label those moments within your story. If you can't, then that means there's a possibility you could have a story where a lot of things are happening, but it's not really going to add up as a satisfying journey in the same way. Or you're not getting as much mileage out of those little moments because you're not thinking of them that way. Now, we do have other workshops here. If you enjoyed my, yeah, my ranting or whatever, my comments about arcs, immersive settings down below. That is going to be next workshop. A lot of material there on how to setting that and add. I think I glitched out again, but that's okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we're having a little bit of glitching. I'll try to see what's going on about that. Oh no, we're not doing the next challenge yet. That's next week. So anyway, so submissions are open. If you have any other questions, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to be wrapping things up. I will see you next week to be reading the finalists, and we will be doing a live poll here at the end of the session so that everybody can vote on them. Yep, in the writer's desk, the title is in the upper corner and you can edit it there. That is correct. Thanks, Vance. Yes, it's the upper left-hand corner. I knew what you meant. Yes, when I said sacrifice, I meant the protagonist is sacrificing something, not someone. Yes, it's their own arc, so usually it's they're sacrificing something up to themselves. I suppose the thing they could sacrifice could be somebody they care about. You could think about that like from the Infinity War standpoint, right? That's essentially what happens in that character arc. How should you format your story? The standard formatting in the writer's desk is fine. You don't have to spend a lot of effort on it. We're just reading it on YouTube. We're not publishing it or anything. And so as long as it's legible, I'm probably going to adjust the fonts anyway for the sake of reading it on YouTube. So don't worry about that too much. Yeah, if you did it in some sort of bananas format, it might, give me a little bit of pause as to why you did that, but it's not going to preclude you making it to the finals. We'll just adjust it. Because you're writing in the writer's desk, there's really not much you can do to be too bananas with your formatting. We don't have like wingdings in there or something. No papyrus font. Yay! All right. Well, I will see you all next week. Thanks so much for joining me. And I apologize about some of the tech. We'll keep working on that. And I will see you around the AutoCrick community. Bye, everybody. You have a wonderful day.